I thought my dad was dead. Then I saw him running the company I work for. I was 7 the last time I saw my father. He kissed me goodnight and said he'd be home before breakfast. I remember asking him if we could go to the park the next day. He smiled, ruffled my hair, and said of course. I fell asleep holding my stuffed bear. When I woke up, he was gone. No note. No bags missing. No billete. Just a silent hole where his voice used to be. For a while. My mom said he'd be back. Then she stopped saying anything at all. After a year, she filed a police report. After 2, she stopped correcting people when they called her a single mother. By the time I turned 10, I stopped asking questions. But I never stopped wondering. There were no photos of him left in the house. Mom said she threw them away during a breakdown. Or maybe she wanted to protect me. Either way, the only image I carried was the one in my head. Tall. Broad shoulders. Dark hair. Green eyes. A low, even voice that read bedtime stories like they were secrets meant just for me. I didn't talk about him much. Not to friends. Not to boyfriends. Not in therapy. It felt like trying to describe a ghost. Everyone assumed he died. I let them. Until the day I started my new job. I had just finished grad school and landed a role at a mid-size investment firm downtown. The interview process was tough, but I felt lucky. The office was sleek, the benefits were great, and the team seemed decent. My title was Junior Operations Analyst. It sounded small, but I was excited to get started. The first 3 days were quiet. I filled out onboarding forms, got my ID badge, learned the software systems. On Thursday morning, we had an all-hands meeting. Every department packed into the conference room. Coffee cups. Binders. Nervous smiles. I grabbed a seat near the back. Then he walked in. The CEO. People clapped lightly. Some stood. He waved politely and walked to the front of the room. He wore a navy suit, sharp but understated. Salt and pepper hair, clean shave. Confident. Calm. His voice was steady as he thanked the team for a strong quarter. I stopped breathing. There, right in front of me, was the face I hadn't seen in 20 years. Older, thinner, but it was him. The same green eyes. The same mouth that used to read me Goodnight Moon. The same exact voice. I blinked and looked again, hoping I was wrong. But I wasn't. It was my father. Alive. Talking. Leading a company. Laughing with his team. He had changed his name. His title. His life. But I knew it was him. Every part of me screamed it. I left the meeting early. Said I felt sick. Locked myself in a bathroom stall and tried not to throw up. My hands shook so badly, I dropped my phone twice. I wanted to call someone. Anyone. But who do you call when your dead father is now your boss? I stared at my reflection in the mirror and said his name out loud, just to hear it again. James Monroe. That was what the nameplate on the wall said. But that wasn't who he was. Not to me. To me, he was the man who promised me the park and vanished before breakfast. I didn't go back to the office that day. I told HR I had a migraine and went home. But I didn't sleep. I sat on my living room floor for hours, flipping through search results on my laptop, hands trembling as I typed the name, James Monroe, into every platform I could find. LinkedIn, company website, financial publications, interviews, conference panels, photos. There he was, smiling, presenting, standing beside mayors and corporate partners. One article said he founded the firm 15 years ago. Married. No mention of children. I scrolled through photos from award ceremonies and ribbon cuttings. His posture was perfect. His suit tailored. The life he had built looked clean, sharp, polished. There was no sign of the man who walked out of our lives without a word. I zoomed in on his face in one of the pictures. The lines around his eyes were deeper now, his hair more silver than black. But his eyes were the same. That tired kindness I remembered from childhood bedtime stories. The calm tone that soothed me through nightmares. I knew those eyes. And he had erased me from his life. The rage came slow at first, like a warning shot beneath the skin. But it grew. My jaw clenched. My fists curled. My stomach twisted with something more than confusion. He had been alive this whole time, thriving. And he had left us to survive without him. My mother worked 2 jobs for most of my childhood. She missed my school plays and fell asleep during parent-teacher conferences. Not because she didn't care, but because she was exhausted. I remembered her crying quietly in the kitchen once, thinking I couldn't hear. I remembered asking if Daddy was ever coming back, and the way her voice broke when she said, "No, sweetheart, I don't think so." He did this. And now he was shaking hands in boardrooms and giving quarterly pep talks like nothing had happened. The next day, I went back to work. I acted normal, smiled at my team, asked questions about policies and deadlines. I kept my head down and tried to breathe evenly when his name came up in conversation. He wasn't in the office that day, out at a client meeting, according to my supervisor. That gave me room to think. By Friday, I had memorized the layout of the building. His office was on the top floor, corner unit, frosted glass walls, an assistant stationed outside, always closed door. I started making a list in my notebook. Things I wanted to know. When had he changed his name? Why did he leave? Did my mother know? Did he have another family now? Was I just part of a life he wanted to forget? I needed answers, but I couldn't ask him yet. Not in a hallway. Not with 20 years of silence between us. I needed to plan it. Control the setting. Stay calm. If I confronted him too soon, I knew I would fall apart. That weekend, I went to my mother's house. She greeted me with a tired smile, like she always did. Her hair had thinned since I last visited, and she looked smaller than I remembered. We sat in the kitchen, just the two of us. I asked her something I hadn't dared ask in years. Did you ever find out what happened to Dad? She didn't look surprised. She looked relieved. She didn't answer right away. My mother stirred her tea slowly, eyes fixed on the steam curling up from the mug. Her hands looked older than I remembered. Wrinkled, pale, fingers slightly curled from arthritis. When she finally spoke, her voice was soft. "I always wondered if you'd ask again," she said. I didn't push her. I just waited. The silence between us was heavy, but it felt like she had been carrying something for a long time, and now it was finally close to the surface. "I never had proof," she continued. "But deep down, I knew he left on purpose." She paused, pressing her lips together like the words tasted sour. "There were things I never told you, because I didn't want you to hate him." I stared at her, heart pounding. "What things?" She sighed and looked out the window. 6 months before he disappeared, she said he started pulling away. He spent more time alone, said work was overwhelming, started locking his briefcase. She thought he was having an affair, but every time she asked, he said he was just tired. Then he started talking about needing space. Not in a loud or dramatic way. More like someone preparing to walk out quietly. She told me that the night before he vanished, they had argued. She had asked him outright if he still wanted to be part of the family. He didn't answer. Just walked out to the garage and stayed out there for hours. The next morning he was gone. "Why didn't you ever tell me?" I asked. "Because you were 7, she said. You were already hurting. I didn't want to give you another reason to feel abandoned." I felt the sting of tears, but I blinked them away. "Did you ever try to find him?" She nodded. "I hired a private investigator once, 5 years after he left. He came back with nothing. No credit cards. No social security activity. It was like he vanished. Or changed everything, I thought." I debated telling her what I knew. That he had a new name now. A new company. That I had seen him in the flesh and heard him speak in the same voice that used to tell me stories before bed. But I held it in. I wasn't ready. Not yet. I left her house with a pit in my stomach. Sunday night, I returned to my apartment and opened my laptop again. I searched through old public records, marriage licenses, corporate filings. His current name had no connection to his old one. No digital fingerprints linking James Monroe to the man who once called himself Daniel Reeve. But there were gaps. His professional history only started 15 years ago. No mention of where he had lived before. No childhood, no family, nothing before the company was founded. He had built a firewall between his past and present. He had erased me. On Monday, I went into the office early. I stopped by the receptionist's desk and asked about our CEO's assistant. Just casual small talk. She mentioned that he had been with the company from day one and that he kept a very private schedule. Later that afternoon, a company-wide email landed in my inbox. James Monroe would be hosting a closed-door leadership seminar next Friday. 10 employees would be invited for a personal development session. Names would be pulled randomly. I stared at the screen. This was my chance. And I would make sure my name was on that list. I knew someone in HR. Not well, but enough. His name was Connor, a guy I'd chatted with during onboarding. He was friendly and forgetful, often overwhelmed with emails. I waited until the end of the day, when most people had packed up, then walked casually into his office with 2 coffees in hand. I smiled, handed him one, and thanked him for helping me settle in. He looked surprised but grateful. I asked how the random selection for Friday's leadership session worked. He explained that the system picked employees from a filtered list of department reps and that the final names were approved by senior managers. I leaned in, pretending to joke. "If I bribed you with coffee, could you slide my name in there?" He laughed. Probably thought I was half serious. But I watched his screen as he scrolled through a spreadsheet. My name wasn't on the draft list yet. "You never know," he said, sipping the coffee. "The algorithm likes new hires sometimes." When I left, I knew what I had to do. That night, I used my work login to access the shared internal drive. Most people didn't know the event planning folder was still publicly visible. Buried inside was a form template. I opened the list, copied the format, and typed my name at the bottom. I saved it under a duplicate file with the same date and naming convention, then deleted the original. I didn't feel guilty. I felt steady. On Thursday, the final list went out. My name was third from the top. The session was set in the executive boardroom. 10 chairs. Nameplates printed. Bottled water arranged perfectly beside black notebooks. I arrived early and sat near the end, not too close, not too far. At exactly 9, he walked in. James Monroe. My father. He greeted each person by name, shook hands, made eye contact. When he reached me, I braced myself. He paused, looked at my face just a moment longer than the others. Then he smiled and said, "I'm glad you could join us, Claire." My name. He said it like it was the first time, like he was reading it off a list. No recognition in his voice. No flicker in his eyes. He didn't know me.
Or he was pretending not to.
The meeting started. He spoke about leadership, decision-making, resilience. The words sounded rehearsed, like a man who had practiced being inspirational for years. He told a story about starting over after failure. How sometimes life demands a hard reset. How building something from the ground up requires sacrifice. I watched every movement, every twitch of his mouth, every time he paused before answering a question. Not once did he look at me again. After the session, as people gathered their things, I stayed seated. He walked past me, heading for the door. I stood. "Mr. Monroe," I said. He stopped and turned, polite. "Yes." I held his gaze. "You used to read me stories at night. I was 7 the last time you said goodnight." He blinked. Just once. His face didn't move. Then, finally, he spoke.
"I'm sorry."
"You must have me confused with someone else." And then he left the room. I stood there alone, heart hammering, hands clenched so tightly I left crescent-shaped marks in my palms.
So he was going to lie.
Even to my face. Even now. The door clicked shut behind him, and I stood there, frozen. I had rehearsed 100 versions of that moment. Some ended with a tearful reunion, others with him collapsing in guilt. Not once did I imagine him looking me straight in the face and denying everything. I sat back down, not because I wanted to, but because my legs felt like they might give out. The boardroom emptied slowly, the buzz of casual conversation fading into silence. Eventually, I was alone. I stared at the empty chair he had sat in. The notebook he left behind was gone, like he had taken every piece of himself with him. That night, I couldn't eat. I couldn't think about anything else.
He had looked at me.
He had heard my words. And still, he pretended I was a stranger. Was he afraid? Ashamed? Or had he truly erased me so cleanly that I no longer fit in his version of the world? I didn't go to work the next day. Instead, I drove back to my mother's house. She was folding laundry on the couch when I walked in. I didn't sit. I just looked at her and said, "He's alive." She stopped mid-fold. Her hands dropped to her lap. I told her everything. That he changed his name. That he built a company. That I saw him. Spoke to him. That he denied knowing me. She covered her mouth with one hand and leaned back into the couch like someone had pulled the air from the room. He said he was sorry, I told her. But not to me. He said it the way strangers apologize for stepping on your foot. Like I was just another face in a long line of meetings. She didn't cry. I expected her to, but she didn't. Instead, she sat perfectly still. "I always knew," she said quietly. Not where he went, but that he had walked away on purpose.
No accident. No tragedy.
Just a choice. He told me once that he felt buried. That he wanted to start over. I thought it was a phase. A breakdown. I didn't think he would actually leave. "Why didn't you tell me that?" I asked. "Because I didn't want you to carry the weight of someone else's decisions. I thought it would break you." It almost did. I left her house feeling like I had opened a door I could never close. The next few days passed in a blur. I went back to the office. Sat through meetings.
Smiled when people spoke to me.
All while knowing the man 2 floors above had once kissed me goodnight and then walked out of my life. But something changed in me. I stopped asking myself if I should forgive him. I stopped wondering what I did wrong. I started focusing on what I deserved. And what I deserved was the truth. So, I did what he never expected. I started digging. Not just into him. Into his new life. His records. His history. Old business documents. Archived articles. A photo buried in a real estate filing from 12 years ago showed him standing in front of a house with a woman and 2 young boys. His new family.
His new story.
They looked happy. And suddenly, I realized I wasn't angry anymore. I was done chasing a man who had already decided who he wanted to be. But that didn't mean I was finished. He had rewritten his life. Now it was my turn to tell the part he tried to bury. I printed the photo and pinned it to my wall. Not to stare at him, but to stare through him. In the picture, he had his arm around the woman, smiling like nothing had ever gone wrong. The 2 boys stood in front of them, holding soccer balls. The caption read, "New executive brings family values to town." I almost laughed. Family values. He left one family to start another. At work, I kept my distance. I didn't go near his office. I didn't speak to his assistant. I did my job quietly and waited. Waited for an opening. I knew he wouldn't recognize me in passing. He had trained himself not to. But I had something now that he didn't. I had the truth. And I wasn't planning to keep it hidden. I started writing. At night. During lunch breaks. On the bus. I wrote down everything I remembered. The bedtime stories. The Sunday morning pancakes. The sound of the front door the morning he left. I wrote about the police visits. The questions. The growing silence in our house. The years of looking at every stranger on the street and wondering if it was him. I wrote about my mother, too. How hard she worked. How alone she was. I wrote about the day I found out who he became. About that moment in the boardroom when he looked at me and lied. The more I wrote, the clearer it all became. It wasn't about revenge. It was about the space between what people pretend to be and what they actually are. By the end of the second week, I had 15 pages. By the third, nearly 50. I didn't name him directly. I didn't have to. The story spoke for itself. I changed the names, blurred the company details, and published the piece online under a pseudonym. It went up on a popular blog that featured anonymous essays. I called it The Man Who Disappeared. I posted it quietly.
No fanfare.
No hint of who I was. But I watched. The comments started small. Then they grew. People shared it, related to it. Some said they cried. Others said they had lived the same kind of abandonment. The story found a life of its own. And somewhere in that wave of anonymous grief and validation, I felt something inside me begin to settle. The next Monday, everything felt different. He walked past me in the hallway. We made eye contact. I didn't look away. Later that day, during a company meeting, someone made a joke about the man who disappeared. Apparently, the piece had gone viral in corporate circles. No one made the connection to him. Not yet. But I saw the way his face tightened when they laughed. The way his hand twitched before he forced it still. He knew. He had read it. He just didn't know who wrote it. The next morning there was a note on my desk. Just a folded slip of paper with no name. It said, "We should talk."
No signature.
But I knew who it was from. I folded the note carefully and placed it in my drawer. I wasn't ready to talk. Not yet. I had more to say. The note sat in my drawer for 3 days. I didn't touch it. I didn't respond. He didn't follow up, and I didn't expect him to.
That was always his way.
Say something once, then leave the weight of it in your hands. On Thursday, I found him waiting near the elevators as I left for lunch. He wasn't smiling. No charm, no public face. Just a quiet man standing alone, looking more tired than I had ever seen him. He asked if we could talk in private. I said no. He asked again. Said he had read the piece. That he knew it was mine. I looked at him and said, "You knew it was me the moment you saw me." He didn't argue. We went to a coffee shop 2 blocks from the office. Not his usual kind of place. No suits. No glass walls. Just chipped mugs and an old radio playing music from 20 years ago. We sat across from each other in a small booth. He looked smaller now. Not in stature, but in presence. Like whatever power he had built up over the years couldn't protect him from this version of himself. He told me he was sorry. I let him say it. Then I waited. He said he left because he couldn't breathe. That the pressure of family, money, expectations, and his own failures had made him feel like he was drowning. He said he had convinced himself that disappearing would do less harm than staying. He said he believed I would be better off without him. I listened. Then I asked, "Did you ever think about coming back?"
He said he did.
Many times. But each time he got close, the life he had built had grown more complicated. He had a new wife, 2 sons, a reputation. He said he told himself that opening the door to the past would destroy everything. It already had, I said. You destroyed it when you walked out. He nodded, slowly, like he had been waiting years to hear those words. I asked him why he never reached out. Not once. Not even anonymously. Not on a birthday. Not after high school. Not even to check if we were still alive. He looked down at his coffee. Because I was a coward. I believed him. But that didn't make it enough. I told him what he missed. My first school play. My graduation. The day I got into college. The night Mom cried herself to sleep after pretending she was fine at dinner. I told him he didn't just leave me. He erased me. He said nothing for a long time. Then he reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a photograph. It was of me, 7 years old, wearing a striped dress and holding a balloon. I remembered the day. A birthday party at the park. He had kept it. He pushed the photo across the table. "I don't expect forgiveness," he said. "But I am sorry." I picked up the photo. I didn't speak. I left the coffee shop without saying goodbye.
And I didn't look back.
Because sometimes the only power you have is in choosing when to walk away. I sat with the photo for a long time after I got home. I didn't cry. I didn't rage. I just stared at that little girl, frozen in time, smiling at a party she had no idea would mark the beginning of her loss. For years, I thought closure meant answers. That if I could just find out why he left, I could finally move on. But now I had the answers, and I still felt the same weight in my chest. The truth didn't clean up the past. It didn't undo birthdays missed, questions left unanswered, or the version of me that never learned what a father's love was supposed to look like. He had kept the photo. That meant something. But it didn't change the fact that he had built an entire life without me. He had watched me grow up in silence. From afar. If he had really loved me, if he had truly meant to come back, he would have. The next morning, I logged into the blog and posted the final part of my story. I didn't rewrite it to make him look better. I didn't protect him. I told it exactly how it happened. I ended it with a simple truth. He walked away.
And I stopped waiting.
The piece spread even faster than the first one. Thousands of shares. People connected with it. Some were angry. Some were moved. Others wrote in to say they finally understood their own grief a little better. That was what mattered. That the pain I carried all these years had a place to live now. Somewhere outside of me. I started getting emails from editors, podcasts, journals. People wanted more. But I didn't want to tell his story anymore.
I wanted to tell mine.
I took a week off work. No excuses, no lies.
Just time.
I needed to reset. I walked around the city for hours with no destination. I called my mom and thanked her for surviving what he left behind. I sat in bookstores and cafes and let the silence feel like peace for once. When I returned to work, I passed him in the hallway. He nodded.
So did I.
There was no drama. No more words. And I realized then that I didn't need him to feel guilty forever. I didn't even need him to fix it. I had already done the hard part. I had built my own life. The version without him. A few months later, I accepted a position at a different firm. Better pay.
Different city.
A clean break. On my last day, I left behind a note in my drawer. Not for him. For the next person like me who might walk in thinking their past would never catch up. It read, "You are allowed to remember. You are allowed to let go. Do both." As I stepped out of that building one final time, I didn't feel abandoned anymore. I felt chosen. Chosen by myself.